Okay. So good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today at the 2021 Summer Academic Conference. My name is Gina Anzalone. I manage the AMA Foundation. As the philanthropic arm of the AMA Foundation champions individual marketers who are making an impact in our profession and community. We recognize marketing visionaries who have elevated the field, and we support the next generation of marketers who will transform the profession. The Charles Coolidge Parlin Marketing Research Award is the oldest and most distinguished award in the field of marketing. The award is given to leading scholars and practitioners in honor of Charles Coolidge Parlin, who is considered the pioneer of marketing research. To be awarded the Charles Coolidge Parlin Marketing Research Award, distinguished academics and practitioners must have demonstrated outstanding leadership and sustained impact on advancing the evolving marketing research profession over an extended period of time. It is my honor to introduce the 2021 Charles Coolidge Parlin Marketing Research Award co-winners, Doug Holt and Jerry Olsen. Doug, if you would like to introduce yourself first to the group.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, first of all, it's certainly it's a huge honor to win this award. I really wasn't aware of it. I don't keep track of awards very carefully, but then I looked at the chart of prior winners and was kind of awestruck. Ted Levitt, Roe Alderson, Michael Porter, Phil Kotler, Peter Drucker, and thought, wow, it's extraordinary to be even, I don't feel like I'm even standing on shoulders. I feel like, it's very nice to be on a list with folks like that. So I'll just give a brief introduction to why. I have no idea why the people who chose me, but I'll tell you what I've done, since a lot of my work has not been that led to the award. I think hasn't been published in AMA journals and so forth. And I'm probably the outlier here. And there may be some interesting lessons learned for AMA and for the field if there's interest in reproducing other strange outliers such as myself. So I started a long time ago as a very traditional marketeer. I got a MBA at University of Chicago, very analytic, was a MBA marketeer at Clorox, very P&G spinoff, very traditional. When I went to get a PhD, I became interested in, wow, there are these things called theories, and you can actually use them to get traction on these marketing problems that I was always puzzled by. And I became very interested eventually, did lots of work in kind of cultural consumer research, but became eventually interested in brands. And I studied a lot in fields that were not traditionally applied to branding, which was mostly psychology, and then increasingly more methodological approaches, more quantitative approaches. Media studies, history, anthropology, sociology, these sorts of fields, and came to believe that there was a strategy model, a model that would explain the success of a great number of brands that I came to call iconic brands, that was not visible, not understood by the field, because the field didn't understand these brands theoretically. And so I spent a number of years inventing sort of a new set of methods, kind of, borrowing and cutting and pasting and synthesizing different methods from these different fields. In particular, what I called a brand genealogy, and looking at these brands historically and building a new theory and a new set of methods to support that theory that I called cultural branding. And suddenly published a book called How Brands Become Icons, a number of articles, another book, and more articles. Interestingly, never published in the major marketing journals, and for a reason, because basically I couldn't. This kind of work is methodologically is unorthodox in a way that it's really not accepted, wasn't accepted. It would be way too much work and would never get published in the way that I wanted. So I had to bypass all the prestigious AMA journals to actually get traction with what I, for me was the methodologically and theoretically the hardest work, the more sophisticated work I've done, but applied work and using methods that were very different, historical methods, discourse analysis, things that weren't done in the field. And so I've been at this for a while now. I didn't mean to become a consultant, but I started receiving interest right away. And for the last 18 or 20 years, have been doing consulting, kind of at the highest level, strategy consulting, which is another interesting thing to consider because I don't consider myself a market researcher. I consider myself a strategy person who very vested in the right methods, the most, the methods that are the most relevant, most rigorous and sophisticated methods for the problem at hand. None of which were the ones that I was ever trained in. I had to learn them myself, kind of on the fly over the last 30 years. So I think that's an interesting thing to ponder as well. So I should probably shut up at this point. But yeah, so I do what I call cultural branding, cultural strategy. And one of I think the other things that may be worth revisiting in this discussion is I'm very strong advocate of not siloing market research. So I think there's a bunch of methods that we need to add to the toolkit that we don't, that are kind of held at, especially in the U.S. I moved actually to Europe to be in a crowd that was more more interested in these sorts of culturalist methods, but also. Market research becomes impoverished when it's just treated as research. When you bring in the market research company to do the tracker, to do the segmentation, to do whatever, pop in, pop out. All the work that I do combines research, strategy, and execution, all in iterative development with the client. And if you're not doing that, the method falls apart. The market research falls apart unless you know what questions you're asking, unless you're knowing how you apply them. So the consulting practice that I've developed actually isn't a research practice. It's a research strategy execution practice. So anyway, I will stop there. That's what I'm doing these days. Very interested in other people developing that. I would desperately wish that the field had a place to develop that kind of work, because I really believe that right now, still to this day, I'm not an academic anymore, in part because there's no place for that kind of work in the field. So I'll leave it with that provocation and turn it over to Ray.
Thank you, Doug. That was great. I look forward to diving deeper into that with the rest of the panel as we move forward. Jerry, congratulations to you as well. Please introduce yourself to the group and any commentary you want to share on your background and work.
Yeah. Well, I'll start out like Doug did, because I was quite surprised when I learned that I was awarded the Parlin this year. And I went back and looked at all the previous owners, or previous winners as well, or previous recipients, and was, amazingly humbled by that. So I would start by saying a steal from, I think, what Garth Brooks said when he got an award at the Kennedy Center. He said, "I feel like the weak link in the chain, but at least I'm in the chain." And so I'm not quite as much of an honor as Doug, but I'm resonating with that as well, because I think I've done things a little bit differently than quite a few people do. I've had 2 full careers, and I was very fortunate in that. One is ended and one is ongoing. So I was a professor of marketing at Penn State for 34 years. I taught courses, mostly consumer behavior courses at all the levels. I was chair of the department for 10 years. I got a named professorship. I supervised like 14 PhD dissertations and so forth. Very classic kind of thing. I avoided almost all administrative duties, which I'm proud. And I enjoyed all of it. I love being a professor. But I've also liked studying real world problems. And I tried to do that over the years, but it wasn't very successful. I wasn't able to develop a consultancy practice as a professor. But in the early 90s, my good friend Jerry Zaltman invited me to be an outside member of the Mind of the Market Lab at Harvard. It was a group of pretty high level marketing executives that Jerry brought together to study to think about the unconscious mind and to see how that might influence some of their thinking and their work. So he invited me to be an outside, I don't know exactly what my title was, outside advisor, let's say. And I did quite a few projects with Jerry and these marketing executives. They were very challenging. It was challenging to get these points across to them about the unconscious and about metaphor. And it was great fun. The more we had fun like that, the more we said, we need more of that. And in the late, I guess it was 1997, we formally formed a company. We had no clients, we had no money, but we formed a company. And almost immediately we got clients and started work. It was really amazingly fun and challenging. We've done, I think, 1,300 projects so far in our 24 years. And I think it's more than 30 countries. Some people say it's 35, but I'll just say more than 30 companies or countries on almost any topic you can imagine, or a very wide variety of clients. So the most fun, perhaps, is the learning we got from our clients. So I resonate with Doug's point about integrating and blending perspectives and orientations and coming up with 1 + 1 is 3 instead of 2. That was very enjoyable, and it still is. So I'm still involved with Olsen Zaltman, the name of our company, because all the cool names were taken. We tried all sorts of names, ended up with our own. I live in Idaho now, so I'm close to fly fishing and skiing, which is partly what brought me here. I'm not in Pittsburgh, where our main offices are. And I'm not really that directly involved in project work anymore. So I'm on the leadership team at Olsen Zaltman. I'm amazingly, the CFO and the so-called visionary, where my job is to think up cool stuff, which is what I always thought a professor was all about. And so I still get to do that. And it's still fantastic fun. And I'll stop there.
No, that's great. That's great. We'll have to learn more about fly fishing at some point in a conversation later.
You're welcome to come out anytime.
Sounds amazing. Before we kick off into some panel questions, I want to introduce the 2020 Parlin Award recipient, Jay Walker Smith. Jay Walker, would you like to provide some insights and introduce yourself as well?
Thanks very much, Gina. It's a great honor to be part of this Parlin tradition. I did the same thing that Jerry and Doug mentioned. I went and looked up all the past recipients, and I'm just glad to be a link in the chain. I'm also a little intimidated just sitting here in today's panel with Jerry and Doug. So I think this is a great honor, and it really recognizes a lot of pioneering people who've made some contributions over the years to our industry. My path is also a little circuitous. I had a graduate school moment where, you know, the light bulb goes off and you realize what you're interested in. And for me, it was just kind of the boring thing of survey research. There was just a moment where a professor whom I later studied with was looking for telephone interviewers, you know, cheap graduate student labor. And I raised my hand because I wanted a little extra pocket money, and discovered that talking to people about what was on their minds and some of their opinions about issues of the day was of great interest to me. And I got into survey research and kind of spent my graduate school career learning as much as I could about how to do work in this field. My first job was at Friendly Ice Cream, actually, shortly after it had been acquired by Hershey Foods. They were trying to make a marketing company out of an operationally driven company. They had hired a guy from General Foods, which for a long time was kind of the premier marketing company in the world. He was in the process of trying to create a marketing culture within Friendly. Of course, they didn't give him any budget. That's just a very typical kind of corporate operating practice. So he solved that problem by hiring people fresh out of graduate school. So it was me and about a dozen other people just like me who had absolutely no experience whatsoever, but we were all eager. We could stay up late at night way back then, and we wanted to try and make a difference. And I just remember the first time my boss, his name was John Burke, called me into his office and he said, "Okay, Walker, we really need to get going with research here. And the first thing we need to do is a segmentation study." And if I just wish I could have seen the look on my face at that moment in time, because I had absolutely no idea what a segmentation study was. But John just reached over in his Rolodex and pulled out a little card and said, "Listen, just call up this guy and get him to come in here and do a little seminar on segmentation research for you and for everybody else." And of course, the guy who he pulled out of his Rolodex, for those of you who are old enough to remember, was a guy by the name of Russ Haley, who back in the 60s, when he was running research at Gray, actually pioneered attitudinally based segmentation research. So I got the luck of the draw, if you will, really enabled me to catch up fast. And I went from Friendly's to a little bitty small marketing oriented business in South Carolina called TechSize, which was kind of a niche marketing specialty firm that had a national reputation. I learned a lot there, and then wound up at Yankelovich to work with Kevin Clancy, who is a past Parlin Award winner himself, and also a pioneer in many aspects of our field. And I have kind of been at some version of TechSize ever since. I call it, TechSize version, 55.0 or something like that. Yankelovich has become part of Kantar now. And so I've been at Kantar for about 15 years at this point, still doing a lot of the things that I had the opportunity to learn how to do at Yankelovich, which was study consumer trends, consumer futures in the context of brand strategy, and to learn a lot of the specialties that Yankelovich helped pioneer, like generational research and other kinds of trends-based forecasting work. So I continue to do those kinds of things at Kantar, and like Jerry, I have the privilege of kind of sitting around and trying to think up big, interesting new ideas, and then I have to figure out how to make them relevant to clients. So it's an interesting opportunity, and it's just been a great journey. So thanks, Gina. I'll stop there.
Oh, no, thank you all for providing that historical context, and I congratulate each one of you on being selected for this award. I work very closely with the committee that determines the recipients, and I can say from firsthand knowledge, we were all endlessly impressed with the work that you have done. So thank you for what you have done and what you will continue to do. So as I, oops. Sorry about that. So as I kick off the panel questions, I want to start Doug and Jerry, one to you first. You've both had long and productive academic careers, and then, as you said, you left your universities to found consultancies that address real-world marketing problems. You appear to use, apply, and leverage many of the theoretical and conceptual ideas and methods you studied in academia. So my first question is, why did you do this? What made you want to make that change? Jerry, I'll start with you.
I mean, so Gina, do you mean why would I leave academic nirvana to go into the rough and tumble world of marketing and research and run a business? There's a pretty short answer. It was simply to have more fun. And that's fun as a professor might think of it, or at least as my professor brain thinks of it. It's playing around with ideas and seeing if they actually can do something, see if they can work, see if somebody cares. A little bit different kind of caring than getting a publication in the AMA journals. So I did like being a professor, as I mentioned before, but after a while, as you become a senior professor and a senior full professor, and you have all kinds of responsibilities, the amount of time you have left to actually do research and think up cool stuff is down. And the fun quotient of being a professor declined for me, and I think for Jerry Z, and I don't know, maybe for Doug too. In retrospect, when you get to a certain age, you can look back, as we all have done recently, and think about what was going on. I've always been attracted to what I would call real world problems, or just the real world. I got enamored of psychology, and my degree is in psychology and consumer psychology, which I think is the most, or at least one of the most practical disciplines for addressing real world problems. So I was really lucky there. I was lucky to get into the consumer psych program at Purdue, where I got lucky again because I got to work with the late Jack Jacoby, who's an amazing guy. And he, while we were in grad school, got lots of consulting gigs from pretty big companies to do pretty challenging work. And I got to work on those that further whetted my appetite for addressing problems that other people had. But as I went along at Penn State, where I've stayed in my entire career, by the way, which is, again, another outlier, I guess, example, there were just not that many chances to work with companies and have consulting opportunities. So that's, as I mentioned, I got involved with Jerry Zaltman at Harvard in the Mind of the Market lab, and that led both of us to see the fun in dealing with these really complex problems and seeing if our theories and concepts had anything to say about them.
Great.
Another famous psychologist passed away recently, Albert Bandura, who was a phenomenal guy. And he had a number of great contributions to the field, but one of them is the idea of reciprocal determinism, which I've used in my work forever and still do. It's like A causes B, but then B causes A, and it's an ongoing system of reciprocal influence or reciprocal determinism. I think that working in academics and industry is an example of that, where academics can bring ideas to their clients. Their clients have different ideas and different perspectives, different points of view, different mental models even of how the world works. And that can get fed back to the academics, and 1 + 1 is now 3 or 4 instead of just 2. So I love that. It's not for everyone. Obviously, some people thrive in the academic environment and play that by those sets of rules. But for certain people, I think that go back and forth between academics and business and how they blend together and influence each other and can enrich each other's perspectives is great. The last thing I'll say is I realize now, after many years of somewhat frustration that have a very eclectic nature. I get pretty bored sticking with one thing. I don't want to stick to a single theoretical perspective and spend my life studying it. I couldn't imagine that. I know, but other people do, and that's fantastic. I do like a certain degree of chaos and confusion. And maybe, Doug, we share that. I don't know for sure. You can speak to that. But I like the challenge of trying to integrate and clarify things, which Walker has spoken to. So perhaps the three of us have some things in common there. But going into the consulting world and working with all of our many different clients on these complex problems has given me all the chaos and confusion that I can like, and I call that fun.
I mean, as long as you find the chaos and confusion fun, that's exactly what matters. Doug, how about you? What motivated you to make that change?
Well, the world sort of called my hand on it more. I didn't make a conscious decision, I don't think, but I can retrospectively provide a rationale at least. Yeah, so I think it starts, back with academia, coming from practice, and I really like the intellectual, the idea side of marketing, which when you're a junior brand manager is like 5 or 10%. It's a very small percent of what you do. So then I got to, PhD and was very excited about ideas, but I bought into this idea that theories are really, they're sexy and powerful and so interesting, intellectually interesting. But once you start, you learn how to publish a publication and figure that out, then you want to, good theory should actually have traction in the world. The ideas should matter. And to me, that's what's exciting. Applying them, getting, mucking it up out in the world, getting stuck in, as they say here in the UK, and really, having ideas that matter and, in tension with others. And what I found as I progressed and got promoted and whatever else and was successful as an academic is that you could do consumer research and that's a whole thing, that's theory unto itself. But if you do marketing, the vast majority of marketing, unfortunately, and this, I'm not the first one to say this, it's a 30, 40-year-old discussion, but academic marketing and the application marketing have, they parted ways a long time ago, in the days of the Roy Aldersons and Ted Levitts and so forth. I think when we kind of scientized marketing and so forth, marketing became, a discipline in which the application became very, very tertiary, except for one field, which is modelers, people who, because they're working, they have to have data sets from the real world. So they're like tied to it. And I think if you look at the Parlin winners, it's very interesting. For the last 20, 25 years, the ones who don't come from industry, the ones that come from academia, they're almost all modelers. And there's a reason for that, because they're actually engaged. Everybody else, you're basically in a conversation with other academics, and the relevance, the application, well, here's the implication section of my paper, yeah, right, yada, yada, yada. That's not what's important. To me, it's just politics. It's not interesting. It's artificial, it's detrimental to academic marketing. And it's also detrimental to the practice of marketing, because there's what happens in the absence of real ideas being generated in a rigorous way is, as anybody who's, ran an agency for a while and mucked it up with, people just make stuff up. We've got a pitch, we've got a deck. Let's just, here's a cool book I read. Here's this, let's put a deck together. I can show you deck after deck of just like BS slapped together stuff, because there's not a rigorous conceptual theoretical discussion going on in marketing that engages academically with ideas. It's two different worlds. So I kind of had enough of that. I decided, let me try, my way. I'm very stubborn and, whatever. Jerry could use other words probably to describe me. But I said, okay, let's find a place where where people value this and do this. So first I went to the Harvard Business School, which actually is an outlier because they value the application. And it was like, oh my God, like here you start with real world and you build theories that actually practitioners, managers have to be impressed by, or you don't get promoted. Whole different world. It's mind blowing. It's like turning the whole academic world upside down in a great way. And once I went to Harvard, there was no looking back. It was like, yeah, that's the way things should be. Unfortunately, Harvard is kind of a little place unto itself, and they're pressed to be legitimate in terms of academia and who they hire and stuff too. So, so even I was an outlier there. So then I went, let's go to Europe, where it's much more Catholic in the small c sense in terms of ideas. And so I became the L'Oreal professor at Oxford, and that was cool. It is much more open there, but still the academics are not engaged out in the world. They're just kind of cut off for the most part from practice. There's not, I think because historically they just hadn't given much to the field. It was just they were kind of separate realms. So I had started receiving these amazing consulting, gigs, Coke and Jack Daniels and BMW. I mean, I published this book and everybody wanted to become an iconic brand. And they said, here, help us. And what I found out over time, this is back in 2002, 2003, I didn't know how to even be a consultant back then. But what I found out is, on somebody else's dime, I could get into these really complex, interesting problems, huge amounts of interesting data, like mind blowing, because every client I work with, I have them give every piece of research, planning document, everything they've ever done. And I spend 2 weeks going through it all. And it's amazing. So you just really understand the world pretty carefully. And over time, I tried to run an agency for a while. I hated it. I had 40 employees. I didn't like that. What I discovered that, to do this application of theory in the way that I like it, which is going in, as Jerry just had ADHD too, and going into these projects for a couple months at a time, is to think of what I do as kind of a think tank, a think and do tank. So each project, I'm not just doing projects, I'm only taking projects, because I'm just a consultant of one. I only take projects where I can advance the theory, the ideas I'm working on. So I've been working, for the last 6 years, I've been doing mostly tech, which I didn't touch ever. And I have a whole new sort of way of doing cultural approach to tech as a result. So it's that sort of thing. So it's just extraordinary luxury, I think, to be able to do that. But I can kind of see, I think, and the clients can see too, because they don't understand the theories that they need because there's no access to it. So I'm kind of this kind of middle person, articulating and compressing and systematizing academic stuff in a very efficient way. And they're giving me all this really interesting cases after case after case to work with and advance my practice. So it's a very luxurious thing, but that really is how academia should work. There should be a place for academia for that kind of really engaged applied work. But yeah, so that's why. So I ended up. I mean, I'm still connected to universities here, but this is so much more fun than teaching yet another MBA course and trying to get another A publication. So why would one do that?
Well, it does sound like you're both having a lot more fun, which I'm glad to hear. Kind of building on that conversation that we were just hitting on about taking theory into application. I mean, what would you say, could you elaborate more on the value that you and your clients gain from your experience, from your past experiences and in academia? And Doug, I'll start with you, and then we'll go to Jerry.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's interesting to sort of step back and think about it, because I'm sure Walker, has seen more and more, generations of the fads and fashions of ideas that kind of pulse through, creative agencies and research firms and brand consultancies and so forth over and over again. So we've gone through many waves of people doing culturalist stuff, from back in the 90s even, when the British, every agency had to have a British planner doing ethnographies, onward straight through. And what's interesting though is it's done, sorry to be so condescending, but it's done at a very superficial level. So there's no people, I'd say clients and a lot of consultants don't, they get, there's the level, the baseline at which that kind of work is done. And also just because it's siloed into this, here's the research, we needed segmentation, we needed this, just the way it's structured by the client and their expectations and so forth. I'm able to come in and bring a whole different, sort of build whole new strategies for firms, and working with, the biggest companies in the world, and most, built new strategies for, for Patagonia and for Jack Daniels and la da da, just by myself, one person, because I'm working with a kind of a portfolio of ideas and literatures. It's not just the idea, it's not the theory. Theory, I've used the word theory too much, but it's really being able to draw on substantive areas academically. So when I talk about like market research, one of the most important ways of doing market research that I bring to the table is doing what people call like desk research or something, but I do discourse analysis, drawing on lots of, of secondary research that have been done, standing on the shoulders of tons of really good academic work. But that's a skill, that's an academic skill. And it's one that, the clients and just don't even understand what that is, because researchers understand, when we think of research, it's like you go talk to consumers, it's customers. So we have this very micro view of what research is, of, whether qual, quant, whatever, it's, you can aggregate people, but when the way I'm looking at the world, it's collective, systemic, historical shifts that you get at not by talking to individual consumers and aggregating them however you do. We're looking at big data patterns. There's a different way of doing that. And so I think that, there's a very particular kind of training that isn't done in marketing that we need in marketing. I spent 20 years in marketing trying to build departments. Back at Penn State, we tried to do this. Illinois, Harvard, Oxford. It's very hard to build these kind of interdisciplinary departments in the current environment because of this push to be more sciencey and so forth. But that's really what clients, when in the end, that's what clients value hugely, is the ability to bring a whole new lens to their categories. They're used to seeing things, here's the benefit structure, here's my brand pyramid, here's, they have a very limited way of thinking about their business. And I can come in and sweep that aside and give them a whole different way of thinking of it that opens up huge strategic avenues that they haven't thought of before. And so, yeah, I'll shut up.
Oh, that's great. So interesting. Doug, I'll throw the same, or I'm sorry, Jerry, I'll throw the same question over to you, and then we'll shift gears to get a different perspective of what's happening on the consulting side at Kantar. But first, we'll shoot that question over to you, Jerry.
Yeah, I agree with all of what Doug said. And we approach it at sort of the opposite level of abstraction, I guess. Doug is up there at the cultural level, the societal level, and our company is down, even though we touch on cultural things, we're down trying to understand people, individuals, in their life space, in their context. And so, so that's just kind of an interesting, maybe an interesting comparison between the two of us. I think academics bring at least two things. And Doug has touched on both of them, so I'll just be redundant. We come with a basket full of theories, concepts, ideas, even methods. And we bring that to the table and can talk to our clients about that. Try to translate those theories and concepts into things that clients that fit their mental frames and their perspectives. The other more subtle thing is kind of a way of thinking, I guess. I haven't been a client, so I haven't worked in business, It's just sort of a curious thing for a business professor to say. I think probably it's not uncommon. But you get into a way of thinking, which I think Doug is alluding to in some of his client interactions, that is quite different from the way I think, and the way many academics think. So we bring those two things to the table, I think. And in our case, with Olsen's Altman, what we brought were two fundamental principles. One is the unconscious mind is a big deal. Much of our thinking, much of our mental life, our mental processes, even the contents of our minds are not really conscious. They're not easily available to conscious discussion. Surveys are good, Walker, and you can speak to this too later, but they're limited. Every method is limited, so it has its limits, and boundaries and guardrails should be put around them. So we brought our interest in the unconscious mind to the fore. That's one of the things we brought, and we've learned a lot from our clients in trying to apply that to their problems. And the other thing we brought was metaphor. There's you can go on, Jerry Zaltman's written a couple of books about metaphor. It was, when we started, an unusual idea to try to talk to our clients about, as was the unconscious mind. Now it's kind of common knowledge and it's in the atmosphere. But metaphor is hugely important to our work, and I think to human thinking and feeling and behavior. The things in our mind are not the things out in the world. They're a metaphor for those things. All concepts and thought is metaphoric. Mind probably works on metaphoric processes, which we haven't fully understood yet. And so that was the challenge that we had, was getting clients to at least suspend their disbelief in what we were telling them and giving us a chance to explore their problems from an unconscious mind level and from a metaphoric level. We use metaphor as a methodology. We ask people to find pictures to express some idea that we want to understand. Those pictures kind of are indirect indicants of those unconscious orientations that are structuring their thinking. Our insights that we deliver to our client are almost always metaphoric. Some of them are literal and at surface level, but the deep ones, the deep orientations, are definitely metaphoric. And most marketing actions, the things you put in an ad, the things you say about your brand, the image that you want your brand to portray, is also metaphoric. So metaphor kind of pervades everything in the way that we think about our work and what clients need and should have. And so that's much more fun than writing an A-level journal article, I would say. If you can work with a client and influence their thinking, and you're still being a professor in a sense, you're still teaching and trying to get ideas across, but it is a challenge and a reward. And also, the learning that you get, as Doug has said out loud, is amazing. So you can't, as an academic, what is an academic? I'll just have a small digression here. I was trained as an experimental psychologist. I always kind of didn't know why I didn't like it that much during my training, but I've started to realize it now. When when you do an experiment in academics, in the academic world, you pick 2 or 3 ideas from the real world, you abstract them, basically not change them, and you study them in a very pristine environment. There are almost no contextual complexity, there's no chaos, no confusion, no all the other stuff that goes on. You're studying a small number of things in a very unique way. We've learned a lot from experiments, I think, over the years. And I'd love that for other people to do. Because I read those articles and books too. But when you try to take that to the real world where there's context and zillions of other things going on that you hadn't included in your experiment, quite often those things don't work so well. And that's what I think is so much fun, is to then bring some of those contextual factors back into the theory, let it enrich your theoretical ideas, and keep going back and forth in Bandura's reciprocal determinism kind of systems-like approach. All right, I'm going to stop there.
No, it's very interesting. I like the concept of an unconscious mind. So we think about it, we're making buying decisions, we're looking at that marketing, but it really is unconscious. So I want to thank you both for those insights. I want to shift gears. And Walker, you begin in the beginning of your conversation, you talked about now you're bringing the big ideas to the conversation and the table. I'd love to hear more about that and more about what sort of methods and applications that is being used at Kantar or that you've used in your past that you feel bring value to your clients, and any other additional thoughts you'd like to bring to the table.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
So I don't know if these ideas are so big or not, but
You're like, why did you remember that?
they certainly have a lot of inflation associated with them. So let me just comment a little bit on some of the remarks about this tension or this interaction between the academic and and sort of the client or the real world environments. Because I think that's a very interesting tension. I mentioned Kevin Clancy, whom I had the opportunity to work with at Yankelovich, and Kevin, of course, was an academic throughout his entire career. He taught at Boston University, and then he was sort of affiliated with the faculty during the entire time he worked at Yankelovich. And later at Copernicus. And it's interesting to me because Doug mentioned modelers having some connection to the real world. Kevin was a modeler. So that's kind of how Kevin brought what he knew from his academic background into sort of real world applications. But one of the things that I learned from Kevin was the importance of disciplined thinking in real world marketing. So Kevin used to do a presentation, a business development presentation that I always refer to as his death wish marketing speech. So Kevin would open this presentation with a slide and he'd say, I forget the exact number, he'd say there's 7 decisions that you have to make about brands in the real world. And there are, 5 options for the first one and 3 choices you can make for the second one, and so forth and so on through all 7. And then he would go, so how many possible outcomes is that? And so he'd multiply each of those together and you'd get some ungodly number, and he would go, if you think you can make the right choice about a brand just by using your gut instinct, your odds of being correct are infinitesimally low. So in effect, you are engaged in death wish marketing because that kind of decision making will kill your career. And then Kevin would go, now, of course, that's why you want to work at Yankelovich, work with Yankelovich, because we make systematic, scientifically based decisions for each of those 7 decisions that you have to make to build a brand. It's the most brilliant business development presentation I've ever seen, because people would line up at the podium to give their business cards to Kevin and do work with Coolidge.
Yeah, that's good.
But it was all about bringing disciplined thinking to marketing. So Doug, you mentioned all the trends and fads in business and marketing, and that's probably a cultural problem that you should attack at some point, because that is, how a lot of marketing operates. It just goes after the latest fad. And I do think that's a little bit of the weakness of the real world. We just waste a lot of money and a lot of time, sort of pursuing this and pursuing that. When more disciplined thinking, which I think really comes from or is rooted more in an academic kind of point of view or experience or training than in real world training per se. Now, I'm sort of drawing a big distinction there, and I know it's not quite as black and white as that, but I do think this kind of disciplined approach to problem solving is one of the contributions that an academic mindset brings to the world of marketing, because there is a lot of overlap. And marketers in the real world, as we all know, are kind of aspiring to the magic theory that some academic is going to come up with to unlock all the secrets of building brands. But I sometimes resolve this by just saying to myself, there are kind of two types of research that get done out there. There's research to run businesses, and there's research for new ideas that can change businesses. So research to run businesses is all about sample sizes and survey questions and repeatability, because what you're looking for are exceptions that require your attention. You're trying to monitor the efficiency of things that you're spending money on. I mean, that's kind of traditional research. But when you're looking for new ideas to change businesses, a good idea there can come from anywhere. It can come from a survey, it can come from a metaphor, it can come from a cultural analysis, it can come from some combination of those things. Everything, to me, everything is fair game in that space. And what you're really looking for is some kind of breakthrough idea that you can bring to the marketplace that can prove itself out and really transform your business. And so at Kantar, we do both of these kinds of things. So Kantar, I think, is best known for the big trackers that we do, a lot of the concept testing, the ad copy testing. A lot of that is research to run your business, and just has to be done in a very systematic and really, in a way, very grounded in science and all that we know about how you do good research and how you measure things properly. Not to say there aren't a lot of issues with that, but that's to run a business. The other thing we do is try to help our clients reinvent their businesses, find growth opportunities that might otherwise be hidden, or get ahead of the game, or chase after some fad in the hope that it might actually be the next big thing. And that's a whole different kind of thing. And I wouldn't call that discipline so much. It can be systematic, but it's a different kind of thing. And I, came from sort of studying statistics and survey methodologies, and I've wound up over here in this other kind of space, which is, the great sort of journey that I've made, that I've enjoyed. But I also just find this to be more interesting and more fun. It is more conceptual. It is all about trying to unlock things that might otherwise be hidden or unavailable to us because we're not looking at them in the right ways. And almost every idea that we come up with in that way is not going to work, so failure is more the reality of marketing than success. But it is engaging, and when you get it right, it really matters for the clients that we're working with. So it's a wide range of kind of things like that.
Great, thank you so much. I invite any attendees if there's any questions that you'd like me to ask these panelists to put those in the chat now, and I will ask them. As we wait for that, I also invite you to ask questions to each other, or if there's an additional topic that you'd like to dive deeper into with our remaining time left.
Doug, in his discussion earlier, made me think about, do we have enough people like the three of us? Not that we're unique, and there have been others. Kevin Clancy's a great example. There are lots of other good examples, but how could we, or should we, try to encourage what I would call fence straddlers, people who keep their feet on both sides of the fence, people who can translate a theory into some practical implication and translate the results of a practical implication back to the theory and so on. That kind of skill, we can't have a field with everyone doing that, but we could probably use more people like that. I just wonder if anybody has thought about that or has any ideas about that. Should we change our PhD education process? Should we have more Harvards around? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's about the reward structure, right? Because a lot of people come, I don't know, maybe half of the people who come into marketing are more applied and come from a marketing background or interested in applied, and others are interested in more conceptual questions, and that's great too. But as we get into it, and as you well know, the structure, the reward structure is you have to publish in the best journals, and the best journals, you can almost put them on a on a scale of more theoretical, more applied. Applied means not theoretical, means not serious, means something. So somehow applied, for my work, my applied work is much more theoretically, I think, sophisticated and methodologically rigorous than my old theoretical work that I became tenured on and so forth. But the field doesn't think that way. And until you restructure the reward structure in that way, and so you mentioned Harvard, like at Harvard, to get tenure and to you get letters from managers or it could be public sector, civil sector, but people applying ideas out in the world. And if your ideas don't apply, there's some people who can get through just doing the 8 journals, but that's the gold standard at Harvard. That's the superstar, the rock star at Harvard. And that's brilliant. It doesn't mean you still have to meet the rigor of being a good academic. You can't just BS your way, and you have to show that. But that's kind of the craft skill. Then you apply it, and to become a full professor and chair and whatever, you have to actually show your ideas work in the world. I mean, to me, that's what you need. And then until you actually have some kind of rejigger the hierarchy such that those are the people that you go, wow, that's freaking amazing. That's the person who I look up to. I want to be like that guy. It can't, because everybody's talked about it, but once you start tuning your whole system to write journal articles, it's very hard to back out of that after 6 years and say, oh, now I'm going to do this applied work. Yeah. So it's a huge institutional thing. That's why I think I was really serious about at the beginning about pushing this to the AMA is one of the organizations that has the institutional clout to actually start that conversation, because you can't, as a single actor, I mean, Harvard can do it. There's maybe 6 or 8 other, mega, elite universities who could follow that. But you can't be, there's a game theoretic problem here. You can't sort of step out. It's an institutional problem. So, but I think it's desperately needed. And I would say that it's not just marketing management. Most of the work I do now is on social, environmental issues, on climate change. same exact thing holds. Exact same problems, and it's at a scale. It's not just a business making some money. It's a lot more serious than that. And we have the same problems. And, so I think we're desperately in need of solving this, this weird silo problem that we have.
Yeah, I just to jump in for a second. So, looking at it sort of, from the side of the table that we're all on now, and it's where there are opportunities for collaboration between corporate marketing or corporate research and academics who study marketing or who study research. And there are things like MSI that have tried to do that over the years and have done that pretty successfully. But again, to Doug's point, that's been a lot about modeling, and it has helped pioneer and support a lot of R&D work around some modeling that's been pretty important. It continues to do those kinds of things, but I don't think we have enough of those kinds of collaborative opportunities. So, where could, say, Kantar look to work with academics to develop tools or to collaborate on client issues, those kinds of things. It's hard to do. We do some reach out. We do a lot of futures oriented work. So, we do a lot of speculative thinking about potential scenarios in the future. And of course, to do that, we have to reach out and get people from a lot of different disciplines to talk to us through interviews or participate with us in brainstorming sessions and that kind of thing. So, we can collaborate in some ways outside our old boundaries, but it's around very specific client problems, and it's not around sort of bridging the gap and bringing a lot of the value that an academic approach could deliver to some of the more general challenges that we face in devising ways to research client problems. I just don't think there are enough good opportunities for that kind of collaboration.
Yeah. Be a worthy goal for AMA to take on. I just say a couple of things that I think would be required, even if we had a process like that you guys have been describing or discussing, because these are topics also that we're wrestling with in our company, within our little 20-person company. In order for any of this to work, people have to have an open mind. They have to realize, they have to be humble about their theories and yes, you need one, and you need to push it as far as you can, but you need to be also humble in that somebody is going to come up with a better theory or point of view or method at some point in time. Nothing lasts forever, or at least it hasn't so far. So this idea of an open mind, I think, for us internally, we're trying to inculcate and develop an open mind, being open to other points of view, even if they're totally antagonistic to your point of view. And so part of what you were saying, Doug, is that there's not an open mind in a lot of the different players here, from the academic promotion and tenure committees and everyone else. And we should, I don't know exactly, I know we need that. I'd love to know exactly how to get people to have a more open mind. We can see it in our US culture, in politics and everything else. So it's a big problem. Who has a solution? Doug, do you have one? That's one of your messy problems.
Once I gave up being department chair, I gave up on solving those messy problems for the field.
No, Trey, that kind of sounds like chaos. It sounds a little bit more like your realm. I'm not sure. I'm just kidding.
Right.
Great.
Just have one other, so I loved what you said about Kevin Walker, and I like the idea of discipline thinking. I might steal that
Yeah.
phrase.
Oh, you
Yeah, that I think is exactly what an academic has, a certain kind of discipline, and so do the managers on the client side have a certain kind of discipline. They might not be the same, and so then we need to have an open mind about how we're going to come to some resolution and some blending of our perspectives in order to get something accomplished.
To push on that a little bit, not diplomatically as I like to do. I think what Walker's saying is correct, and I would push. So flip it in a little different way, which I've written about in my last book and will be in my next book as well. But one of the big problems that we deal with as consultants, as agencies, is that clients, the whole world of marketing strategy, et cetera, at a high level in clients, there's the day-to-day, there's the machine that Walker is talking about, and that hums pretty well. It's a big bureaucracy that you plug the right elements in, and everybody kind of knows. It's kind of a rote thing, but okay, works okay day to day. But the big picture, the whole business could be melting or missing big opportunities and so forth. And the problem that I encountered over and over again and read a little bit in my last book is that the world of marketing, in particular strategy, branding, is dumbed down to a level that it's basically driven by these huge multinational bureaucracies where senior managers have to make the decision, and they have about 15 minutes to engage. And so you are trained as a consultant, as an agency, whatever, to strip any complexity, anything into this incredibly, that's why we have these stupid brand pyramids and things that mean nothing, that become like the crown jewels of the company somehow. And, it drives me crazy. But, one of the things that, the luxury I have as being, with no fixed costs and, consultant one is that I just say, look, I don't do the simple things. This is marketing, consumer behavior. It's complex. It's a messy world. It's, you're trying to engage these big historical shifts in society. You can't boil that down into a one pager. And so forcing, one thing that an academic mind can do, an academic approach can do, is to force clients to get a lot more sophisticated and rigorous in their approach to their business, which is just, it's deeply uncomfortable in some way, but for certain, let's say half, a third at least of people I engage, it's incredibly empowering and generative because they're deadly bored with those brand pyramids too. It's like, what the hell do I do with this brand pyramid? So you give them these new tools and you say, sit back, actually, we can't do this in 15 minutes. We're going to do this over 3 months and I need at least 40 hours of your time. Then all of a sudden things change dramatically. And so you're teaching them what that kind of rigor and sophistication is, that you can't just have the quick and dirty brand fad thing. Oh yeah, that's a cool idea, done. You actually have to, these problems, you can approach them systematically. As from an academic point, I'm doing academic light. I'm doing it in 20% of the time I would as an academic. But for a client, that's holy crap, you're spending it's just ridiculous amounts of time. So I think pushing businesses to pause and take, these things that are really serious and challenging and difficult issues and treat them as such, because we've dumbed down the whole profession, frankly, not we, but the field has over time through these weird forces. So I think it's, that should be our ambition, is to make it a little bit more serious and sophisticated endeavor.
And just to build on that, Doug, clients in the real world are really good at taking an academic concept and kind of misusing it, if you will. So, probably the pyramid you're referring to is like a Maslow hierarchy pyramid. And yeah, I think if I see another one of those things, I'm just going to scream. You know, it's but it just becomes a tool for trying to think quickly in a world where people aren't really given the opportunity to spend time, you know, contemplating some of these issues more deeply in a way that could ultimately be more productive. I was reading an article just the other day when somebody, where somebody was saying they'd gone out and looked for CMOs who have taken over brands and have completed a transformation within that organization to get that organization to be more committed to doing some long-term brand building investment, you know, as opposed to just a lot of short-term spending on some quick hits, typically just to drive some temporary sales lift. So at any rate, on and on about, you know, some of the takeaways about what was required to do a lot of those things. But at the end of that, you know, he said the problem is this process that I've observed through, you know, talking to these CMOs and seeing what they had to do. This is a 3-year process. And if we believe some of these data on tenure of CMOs, and you know, these numbers have their own, you know, kind of problems with them, but the average tenure of a CMO these days is 18 months.
Right.
So you know, they never get a chance to be, you know, deeper thinkers in ways that could help that business long term. The short term pressures are really creating some distortions that I think lead to bigger problems that we then try to throw all kinds of solutions at that don't work. And you know, it's just kind of it is as you were saying, Jerry, this kind of reciprocal process that creates a lot of mediocrity in the business.
Yeah. I'll just say a little story here, a real quick one. When Jerry and I first started, we were it. We did everything. So it was just 2 of us for a couple of 3 years, and we did everything. And we insisted that when we made a presentation, it was a day-long thing. So it's kind of like your 2 months, Doug, or 3 months, or however you all boil down. But we would present the results, we'd play with the results, we'd do workshops, we'd do breakout, we'd, you know, talk and think.
Yeah.
And then we got pushed back and we only could do a half a day. Then it was 2 hours. And we have clients now that, you know, a big project with big ramifications, and we have 1 hour we can give you.
Yep.
So, you know.
I'm jealous, Jerry. I get 20 minutes now.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're trying to work our way back, because when you have multiple, the client, it's sort of like Doug's thing of 2 or 3 months. When we have companies that come back to us 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times, they start to get it, and then you know, they start to loosen up, and they see that they can't deal with this complex set of insights in an hour. It's not that kind of project. Now that's our business and the kind of things that we do, but it's just yeah, there's just so many systemic problems that could be resolved or reduced, and everyone would be better off.
Well,
So Gina, you go back and tell the AMA people this is what they need to be doing now for the next.
It's recorded. I'll share it with senior leadership. Make stuff happen. I hate to cut off this conversation because it's been such a thought-provoking and insightful one. But we're at time. But I want to thank you for joining us today. I want to congratulate you again on being the recipient of the Parlin Award. And I look forward to the work that you continue to do, and hope for a collaboration down the road with all of you.
Okay. Thanks, Gina.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Walker. Bye.
See y'all.
Bye-bye.